is the latest film to hit VOD streaming services in America, at least for now. It maybe would have come to theaters later, or maybe it still would have come to streaming. Who really knows? All I know is that it's out now, except for Vudu, I think, where I accidentally spent 20 bucks on this movie. Let me explain real quick. So the first thing I went to was Vudu to rent Capone, and it said, like, rent now, $9.99. I was like, okay, cool. It was on their homepage pretty much. The first thing I saw was the Capone poster. I was like, okay, I can watch it. Rented it, and then it said, you have the next 30 days to watch this rental, except you can't watch it until June 12th. Like, I literally couldn't press play. It said, watch on June 12th. You can't click this. And I was like, man, I rented this on May 12th. 30 days from now is going to be not June 12th. So I was like, what the hell is this? I went to Amazon Prime, rented it, the same price, $9.99 there, and it played. It didn't give me some watch on June 12th bullshit, so I guess if anyone still uses Vudu, if it's just me, then don't worry about it. But if you use Vudu, don't watch Capone on there. Go somewhere else to watch Capone, because you might accidentally spend 20 bucks on it, like me. This movie focuses on the last year of Al Capone's life. He has been suffering from neurosyphilis for quite a while now. He lives pretty much in exile after serving his time in jail for tax evasion. He lives now in Florida in his own private home. He thinks things are there that nobody else can see. His mind is deteriorating. He pretty much just has like full-blown dementia. And there's questions that he's asking himself, like, are the FBI still watching me? Do I have to be worried about that? Do I have $10 million hidden somewhere on this compound that I don't remember, hiding where I put it? There's a lot of things going on in his life for his last year, but he can't really remember a whole lot, and he's kind of a shell of a human being, and that's what we're focusing on. Now, I know a lot of people probably were not excited for this movie because immediately you see directed by Josh Trank, and you're like, oh no, Fantastic Four again. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. And yes, Fantastic Four is an awful movie. It barely has anything redeemable to it. But I will always go back to Chronicle and say this man has made a good film before. So I still think there is talent in there that he just needs to tap into and fully realize. Fantastic Four also, I can't really blame solely on him. There's also a lot of other things going into that situation, like the dealings going on at 20th Century Fox. They locked him out of the editing room at a certain point in production, so he couldn't get in and do anything. Although he did have personal problems with Miles Teller, I heard. They almost got into a fist fight. He trashed his apartment. He was drunk on set. A lot of stuff was going on the Fantastic Four set. It wasn't just Josh Trank's fault. And I really like the idea of him making kind of a comeback, you know, having a rebound after that. It took a little while, but I'm glad that he's able to get some new work, especially with a concept like this that is very intriguing. It is a good setup for a story, which is one of my positives for this, is that this is a really good setup, and there's definitely different ideas throughout the film that are really great ideas to try to flesh out what being in the mind of Al Capone is kind of like right now, this deteriorating mind, what that's kind of like, how to experience it. There's a lot of interesting ideas in this film. Unfortunately, the execution is really bad. This is no Fantastic, that's for sure, but it's also still no Chronicle. Will Josh Trank ever make a good movie ever again? I'm still hoping so. I will still root for this guy, but this movie was terrible. And a lot of it really does come down to the direction and the writing and the editing, which were all done by him. A lot of this movie just feels very aimless, and it doesn't really feel like it's focusing in on what it actually wants to talk about. It doesn't feel like it wants to talk about anything regarding the life of Al Capone, if there's some grand message we want to deliver about this man, some interesting character study. It just feels like a lot of, well, I want to see this guy shit his pants, shit in the bed, piss himself, and act like a loon. And it doesn't really feel like there's much more being said about that, other than they flash back to the past at one point and you recognize that, yeah, at one point he was on top of the world, the gangster world at least. Unfortunately, none of it really seems to build to something of a real importance, and it made watching this movie feel like kind of a waste of time because it really wasn't doing anything for me. The direction itself also feels very lax. I get the sense that this was like a very lax kind of set, not in the sense of like everyone's getting along, everyone's happy, in the sense that the filmmaking itself was just kind of like, whatever works, like whatever we can get, let's just use it. There's one scene in particular where I thought this, where it's kind of like a nightmare scenario where Al Capone is flashed back into the past life of his. It's supposed to be also like a happy time for him, but because he's revisiting, it's kind of scary and nightmarish. There's an aspect of this movie where you think he's kind of realizing a lot of the bad stuff he did, and it's kind of haunting him. Once again, it's merely just an idea that they randomly kind of insert and don't really follow through with any kind of significance in the narrative. But it's an idea, and it's there, and there's this one scene where maybe we get the visual kind of nightmare feeling of that. And I got the sense that it was supposed to feel a little bit more visceral, maybe a little bit more cramped and claustrophobic, but but because of where the camera was kind of placed, it didn't feel like that. Like, the music was kind of ramping up in like a scary kind of way, but because the camera was in an awkward place, I was kind of like, I'm not really feeling what I think I should be feeling. I feel just kind of awkward watching this. I forgot to mention this in the video when I was recording, so once again, similar to one of my last videos, sorry for the last minute phone audio quality, but there's also a part in this flashback scene where there's a stabbing going on. Someone's tied in the chair and someone stabs him in the neck like 30 million times, but there's one shot where they cut to the neck, and there's only like one place the blood is kind of like squirting out, and you don't really think the knife is making that much impact, and then it cuts away, and Tom Hardy turns around one more time to look at the mess pretty much, and the neck looks totally fine, but you still see the blood that's kind of like dried up on the guy's shirt. It doesn't look like the blood of someone who just got stabbed 30 times and the neck looks totally fine. It's one of those things that further supports the theory of they just kind of went with what they had and they didn't really care all that much about the intricate details of it all. There's a lot of great cast members in this movie. Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks, and he's the dad from Inside Out, and the dad of Skye in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You got Linda Cardellini in this, Noel Fisher's in this, and Matt Dillon. So you have a lot of great cast members in here that aren't doing bad in this movie, and I will give them that. I at least want to compliment them in that regard, that they aren't doing bad in this movie. It's just a lot of their material is kind of weak, and you don't really feel like you're getting to know them at all. It's a lot of just focused on Tom Hardy's Al Capone, and you don't really get a lot more of the other people when they're separated from him. It's a lot of just reacting to Al Capone whenever they're in scenes, or talking about Al Capone when he's kind of nearby, so you can't get more of an in-depth conversation. There's one moment where Noel Fisher and Linda Cardellini sit down, and they kind of make a joke jabbing at Al Capone's mental state, his deterioration. And it was one of those things that I was thinking, okay, this is interesting too, because up until this point, there's a lot of pain when dealing with Al Capone. There's obviously a lot of sadness that these characters are hiding back, but they just made a joke about it, and it's kind of that idea of like, we make ourselves laugh to keep from crying. You know, that idea, like a lot of people have had to deal with people that are sick like this before, and sometimes to get through it, they, you know, keep ourselves laughing in the small times so we don't cry overall. Like, I thought that would have been an interesting idea to explore once more with these other characters, with these two in particular, but it's just that one bit that they had, and I was like, you could have made this a little bit more interesting, a little bit more watchable, if you honed in on a lot of these other characters that obviously have a lot more to say and should have a lot more to do. Unfortunately, this movie is focused on Tom Hardy, and he is a great actor. He's one of our generation's best actors. Even in a bad movie like Venom, one of my positives about that was his chemistry with himself. He played both Eddie Brock and Venom, and he did a good job in that. He was in a bad movie, but he didn't give a bad performance. This is a bad movie, and he gives a horrible performance. He is so bad. I at one point just had to start laughing at it. At first, when it started, I was like, I don't know if I can vibe with it. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of this performance. I don't think it's working for me. And at a certain point when he just starts going, it's like, oh my God, for real. It's like I had to just let go and start laughing at that point. The movie actually starts out with him like he's creeping down the hallway of his house, and it's like a reverse. You think he's like trying to hunt someone down, but it's just like a kid's game of hide and seek, and he's like playing the monster, and he does like a monster kind of growl, like wah, wah, and it's like, okay, yeah, he's playing a monster in this game. But then as the movie continues and he keeps talking, it's like, he's just playing like a monster. Like, it's not just this game he's playing at the beginning, it's just his entire performance. It doesn't help that the makeup looks horrible for him. There's only one shot where it almost looked like Robert De Niro in The Untouchables, where I was like, okay, that looks almost kind of good, but then they keep cutting away to different shots, and it's like, oh, never mind, this makeup is awful. It gets worse as it goes on. He looks like a monster, and he sounds like a monster, so you think you're watching a movie about a monster. And technically you are, because Al Capone has done a lot of bad stuff, but not this over the top. And I know Josh Trank has said, like, whatever the reviews are for this movie, I am proud of this cut. This is my cut, and I'm very proud of this movie. I love it. And hey, if this is exactly what he wanted, then good for him. But as far as the other viewers that are gonna watch this, I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of Tom Hardy being terrible as Al Capone. There's supposed to be another movie called Cicero that comes out at some point, or they haven't filmed it. They're supposed to make it at some point. And it says on IMDb he's cast in it to play Al Capone again in that. And I'm thinking, cut him out and get somebody else to play Al Capone. Literally, Matt Dillon is in this movie, and I was thinking, you know what? Matt Dillon might have done this a lot better. He might play a good Al Capone. Who knows? Anyone is better than Tom Hardy in this instance. I was literally thinking, like, I can't believe I'm watching a movie where Matt Dillon and Tom Hardy are sharing scenes together, and Matt Dillon is the one who is is out acting Tom Hardy. He's acting circles around him. And I like Matt Dillon fine enough, but I think I prefer Tom Hardy overall. Not in this movie, though. Matt Dillon is so much better. Everyone in this cast is better, but it was just that one in particular was striking. But there's also a confusing thing about one of the other characters that Tom Hardy imagines someone at one point. It's kind of like a Fight Club, like Brad Pitt's not actually there kind of thing, but it's not played up enough. And it's weird also because they set up this imaginary character in a scene that Al Capone is not in, so at first you're thinking like this is a real guy, but then later they're kind of talking about like in depth about the Wizard of Oz at one point. It's revealed like, oh, he's not actually there, and then he disappears for like the rest of the movie, but then one scene where he comes back is like, hey, I'm you from your past life, digging on my eyeballs, it's gross imagery, look at it. And it's like, what is this supposed to be? Like, what is this imaginary character supposed to be other than the obvious, like this is a guy from his past that he did wrong, but what's the message you're trying to convey? Are you really trying to hone in on Al Capone feels guilty now? Because I still don't completely feel like you're doing that. Once again, it's a lot of ideas that don't really connect, a lot of scenes that don't really build properly on each other, so everything just feels kind of jumbled and messy. There's no tension in this movie either. Like you're wondering, like, are there FBI guys actually watching Al Capone, or is he imagining it? Like 10 seconds later, they're like, yep, there's actually FBI guys out there. Yeah, that's actually happening. But they're not going to intervene with the plot that much. And you're like, oh, okay. They even come back to the headquarters at one point, and they're like, we got a plan to deal with Al Capone. And the boss is like, all right, but if it doesn't work, who cares? And it's like, what am I supposed to get behind then? If these guys don't care, and I don't care about Tom Hardy's drama because it's so funny, because his acting is so bad, then what am I supposed to get behind? What am I supposed to latch onto? Other than unintentionally bad stuff. That's another thing, is that it gets really confusing whether you're watching a scene that's supposed to be funny or supposed to be more dramatic, because the dramatic stuff is funny because of him, but then when they're trying to build up on a joke, it's kind of like, oh, you're actually trying to get a laugh this time? It's not even really all that funny. So this movie has a really weird sense of tone in that sense. It's not one of those that like a James Gunn would handle it really well, where you'd balance between two different tones. It's one of those where it's confusing which one they're trying to land on, and you're kind of wondering why they'd even try to put in jokes at all. So all of these aimless scenes just kind of build on each other throughout, and you're just kind of bored watching it. It constantly feels like it's dragging because it's not doing anything above and beyond. Then you get this imaginary shootout scene that's supposed to be impressive on an action tension standpoint, but it's not, and then that just kind of divulges into, all right, that didn't actually happen, here's like an imaginary maybe last 5 minutes of the movie. You can't even really tell if what's happening in the last frame of the movie is imaginary or not, and I can't say it without spoiling, but there's a whole other aspect of this story that they keep coming back to, and they're not doing much with it. They're just cutting back to a guy in a room trying to call Al Capone, and you'll see what I mean if you actually watch this movie. But every time they cut back to it, I'm like, okay, are they going to build to something better with this? And it only builds to this maybe imaginary last 5 minutes that I can't even really tell if they're imaginary or not. So look, Josh Trank, I'm hoping for a rebound with him very soon. I hope that his next project, hopefully if he gets another project, I hope that turns out way better, maybe get back to the Chronicle days, but this just did not do it for me. I know he's proud of it and that's great, but I would not recommend this movie for anyone to watch. Even if you're a fan of like Al Capone, this is kind of embarrassing to watch, so please steer away. I'm gonna give Capone a D+. It has some interesting ideas, it's got a neat concept to set it all up, and everyone around Tom Hardy isn't bad, but because they're not given that much to do and the spotlight is too much on Tom Hardy and his horrible makeup, his horrible acting, it's like, I did not really want to watch this movie after a while. The only reason I wanted to keep watching it was just to keep laughing at how bad Tom Hardy was. That's the thing also, like, not only is Josh Trank proud of the movie, but I have no idea if Tom Hardy's actually proud of this role or not. I was constantly watching this movie and going, I would love to know what every other actor is thinking of Tom Hardy right now, because I bet they're all kind of feeling awkward and embarrassed watching him. It's so bad, guys, just please don't watch it. I mean, if you're interested, you want to laugh at Tom Hardy, then maybe, sure, but it's just not a good overall movie, despite it having some potential to begin with. But if you've seen Capone, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.